Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is going to be our next podcast session. This is John Arnold here, of course, J. Arnold & Associates. Part of my newsletter offering is a regular podcast to everything else I'm doing. And with me is, again, my colleague, Chris Fine. Hi, Chris.
Hi, John. Nice to be here. I'm an independent advisor and consultant. I'm with Integrative Technologies. And what are we talking about today?
Well, it's something you've been doing a lot of research on lately, and that's kind of what we call the digital workplace. We are kind of in the kind of post-MoNage event recollection of things, and we did our first podcast about our impressions of the show. But one of the things that Chris and I spoke about on our talk was what we call the digital workplace. And that was a bit of a theme here at the MoNage show. And in particular, what we want to focus on today is what's happening in the actual physical environment. We know the technologies are changing, the applications are changing, the endpoints. We've got Alexa for Business showing up on tabletops now with the Echo device, etc. That's coming. But the bigger story I think we want to get to today, Chris, is what's happening in the workspace itself. That is something that's almost left for another discussion because it's not really about hardware and software. It's about the environment, right?
Right. I mean, traditionally, I think, John, you and I have thought about the technology that's in the workplace. But I started thinking about 3 or 4 years ago about how the space itself is evolving. You know, the real estate, literally down to the square footage, the area, the environment that people work in. And we're seeing several trends start to emerge, which at the base of it affect the relationship between people and space. Mm-hmm. Which is always, the basis of architecture, the basis of forward thinking in design. And historically, the relationship between people and workspace was very passive. So if you went to the office, it was really a container for people and equipment, for assets, and a place where there was a relative degree of at least perceived safety and, a convening place, a place to get together. But over the years, in the last generation of space, in the world of cubicles, it kind of evolved into a big egg crate kind of thing with people and a few offices and cubes, except in open environments like trading floors. But what we're seeing is a change there.
Yeah, and it's a good point about kind of an empty space, and that's traditionally we focus on what IT's needs are, and that's running a network, managing the endpoints, keeping the applications moving. But the environment itself isn't really IT's thing, is it? It really falls into other kind of decision-making lines in the organization, right?
That's right, John. I sometimes refer to it as the strange island, where groups like corporate real estate, IT has a presence, security has a presence. It had historically lived, and it was sort of under the general rubric of corporate services, but not often. It was much more operational than strategic in many cases. Mm-hmm. And what's happening now is that with the advent of a new generation of workers, the need for retention, different work patterns and styles, this island is getting much more active in terms of corporate strategy. How do we manage our assets? And the other thing from a pure business standpoint, if you look at it, is there's many, many, many billions of dollars on the table when you think about real estate and you think about leasing and you think about how much companies pay for this. And so anything that either improves the utility or efficiency of it or reduce costs, reduce energy output, and a lot of other criteria that are now being more thought of can have real dollar impact in a big way.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly there's the financial impact of less space, more people crammed into less space, literally, and also, of course, when we start talking about changing work styles, there's a higher priority now placed on teamwork, right? They want people to work in groups, so that pulls them out of their office spaces, and so now we're certainly seeing new types of spaces emerge, like huddle rooms, right, for kind of ad hoc collaboration sessions. So these things all have to be built in, and there's always been a complaint that these meeting rooms like we're sitting in now doing this recording are often grossly underutilized, so it's a waste of resources in terms of space. And what they want to do is have more of these smaller informal spaces, as this is another example of the digital workplace, right? where this is the way people want to work. So
no, that's right, John, and also the borders are kind of disappearing. So the idea of the workplace as a kind of fortress or protected, both for security and for just operational standpoint, is starting to change because people work from everywhere all the time, and companies are global, all time zones, all different types of environments, and so the challenge for a lot of enterprises is to balance the need for shared space, the need for a place to come together and a place to work with the tools to manage it so that you don't oversubscribe to space or cram people in too much.
Yeah.
And that's triggering a whole technology wave.
There's certainly a kind of a wellness element to that. If people are too stacked on top of each other, that's not good. But at the same time, too, there's another issue about the drive to encourage, remote working, home working, which is cool. But there's always that concern about, well, are employees still going to be productive? Can they be trusted when they're at home? So I'm sure there's also a consideration for making the workplace itself welcoming, maybe even cool compared to the home environment. Hey, you're going to have better toys here, so wouldn't you rather be here kind of thing. So I know there's quite a few different balances to strike. But you've been doing some white paper work, I know, for Aruba, I believe it is.
Yes, and Aruba Networks, which is part of HP Enterprise, did a big announcement at their Global Atmosphere Conference last month about an initiative to use networks in new ways and address the combination of IoT, networking, and real estate. And they announced a consortium of partnerships that include Herman Miller on the furniture side, CBRE, which is the largest real estate player in the world. And so this is very different in terms of a technology liaison. And the vision is to really change the role that end user and endpoint and workplace technology plays, and make it much more active with the introduction of IoT.
Well, just look at where we're sitting now. These chairs and tables are, they're dumb. There's nothing there, but I have no doubt the workplace of the future is going to have, IoT-enabled chairs and tables and the lighting and all the ambient things around us that make the environment, conducive to working. But of course, it also creates new data points to measure productivity, utilization of assets, protection of assets, et cetera, et cetera.
It does, and there's a lot of sensitivity around that. And so that absolutely has to be balanced with security and privacy, opt-in, a lot of other things involving people's preferences and rights. However, the idea is that you create user experiences for all the stakeholders that balance that provide a huge amount of value.
Yeah, this is a really fascinating space. I think we both see that, and I think we'll definitely need to revisit this down the road because this is early days, but I think it's very fundamental for that digital workplace.
It's very early days, but I would mention one more thing that we did talk about, and we've actually seen a fair amount of this at MoNage, demographics.
Yes.
Right? So demographics is such a wave, you can't fight it. And with the transition of the workforce, it's already starting to transition in management even to millennials, but next Gen Z and beyond, that is an overwhelming force, and that is your workforce. And so whether it's an office, whether it's a retail environment, whether it's a factory, a warehouse, this is a workforce that grew up with technology, and they want to have much more active engagement with the environment.
Okay, great. All right, to be continued. This is a really great topic.
Well, thanks very much, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so thanks, everyone. We are closing off here, so appreciate your listening, and we'll be back with another podcast in the next newsletter, and Chris will be talking it up on his website as well.
Thank you very much, everyone.